Hi, I'm Yaira Garcia, and today I'm going to talk about feminist movement. First, to define feminism is a doctrine and social movement that calls for women to recognize capacities and rights that have been traditional reserved for men. A feminist group has have spent more than 100 years uh, fighting for the rights that women deserve all over the world. For me, two of the most important struggles in feminist organization are the struggle for the right to decide over our bodies and the civil rights movement. With the passage of the time, feminist groups continue to reform and adapt new cultures. Feminist groups have created different forms of very original protest, such as the movement called the Tetazo, who, which, in which a group of women in Argentina took the streets with a naked torso to fight for the sovereignty of their bodies, feminist freedom, the beyond visibility that given for got given to the woman's body, and calls for the cessation of machismo. Gender equality has advanced in many countries, but still an unresolved struggle. We continue to be marginalized in employment, politics, sexual stereotypes. Uh, this last one contribute to making women economical depend of men. And in many parts of the world, uh, women's rights simply do not exist. Last week, the salary of some people who work for the legislature in Puerto Rico were published. This was due to the suspicion on inflation in salary. The first thing that caught my attention was the difference in salary between men's and women's. Women with education and high position earned about 2,000 less than a cafeteria manager who doesn't have any education. In this situation, we see how the men continue to be seen as a superior being, no matter how prepared the woman is. Another movement to make advance for feminists was the woman suffrage. This was the largest movement who fight for women's rights. This movement which emerged in the United States during the 19th century, providing political training to some of the early leaders in the Congress. This movement caused much disagreement between activists and women's leaders in Congress after the approval of the 19th Amendment. This movement fought for the right to vote, social barriers that limited women's rights, educational restriction, and the absence of voice in political debates. From this movement, where was an increase in women volunteers from the middle class, progressive, professional, and from the civic and charity organization, which influenced the formation of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. President Wilson in 1970 drive the Congress to pass the amendment on the right to vote for women. Now to talk about women who help with our development, we have Margaret Sanger. She was the first woman to teach family planning. She was persecuted for authorities in England and in the United States by teach family control. Margaret and her sister opened a bear control clinic in Brooklyn. They instruct women about the harmful health hazard of frequent births, miscarriage, and abortion. This clinic was closed for providing illegal service. Sanger continued her leadership role in the United States in 1920, and in 1930s she traveled to Asia and Europe to giving guidance on her method. In 1952, founded the International Family Planning Federation, and in 1965 the Supreme Court legalized the birth control. This fight lasts more than 50 years to be successful. The feminist movement are divided in three categories. The first, call it the first wave, with focus on the right to vote, the struggle led by women groups for access to work, represent in the politics, and recognition not as a professionals. The second wave of feminists is aiming at breaking the chains of patriarchal society. They acquire knowledge about body, health, and sexuality. The women learning about the importance of participating in politics and the right to have a voice. The second wave changed many norms approved by the society and achieved many social and legal change. In 1950 and 1960, the civil rights movement called for new norms in society and rights for people of color. Women play important roles in the different organizations. The civil rights movement contribute to women's rights. The Civil Rights Act in 1964, which prohibited discrimination in employment on the basis of race, color, national origin, and religion, also prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in the Title VII. The third wave of the feminist movement is seen as an ambitious and focused movement by some critics. That's funny. This movement aims to be breaking without the remaining barriers to guarantee better quality of life for women. This includes gender equality, violence, poverty, racism, homophobia, inaccessible medical attention, and outdated work structures. The influence of feminist movement have influenced the life of women around the world, making them recognize their rights and enforce them. It also contributes to the educational development of women, providing access to equal study and work. Feminist movement have working hand by hand with human rights movement, not only working for women's rights, they also joined force for fight for the rights of people of color. These movements were very important for the past generation and much important for the present generation as pioneering feminists work hard to achieve the basic rights of women, such as the right to family planning, the right to vote, and the right to have a decent education. All of these movements have their disadvantage, but in the end, they achieved what was victorious. Most of the initial movement were made of working single and professional, an educated woman, and those whose husband allowed them to participate and were not tied to religious belief. Catholic woman married Catholic woman married to non-liberal men, and uneducated woman did not have much participation on this organization. But but within this organization, discrimination could also be experienced by ranking leaders and by leaders towards women of color who could be part of the organization but could not express their idea. They were simply in the group to be counted, but they cannot share their experience or anything. Like as I said before, new feminist organizations have emerged with new idea and for a form of protest, such as naked body and protest on social network. that try to expand their followers. Most of the new movements are based on the same roots of the previous movement in order to achieve gender equality and the complete liberation of women, as well as they are treated as equal and are not excluded for any area just for being women. Thank you.